So we take about 1 billion breaths in our lifetime. 1 billion breaths. Imagine if we were conscious about every single moment that we breathe. We breathe about 20,000 breaths per day. And most of us go on about our lives without even thinking about a single breath we take. But breathing is a marvel. It is such an interesting mechanism that connects our brain to our lungs, to our blood, and ultimately the new neuroscience of breathing is showing how it also affects higher order things like our thinking and our emotions, and how our breath can impact our emotional state and our thinking, but also vice versa, how our thinking impacts how we breathe, or how we feel. We know often with stress can also impact how we breathe. So in this talk, I want to explore the neuroscience of breathing and give you ideas about how we can potentially breathe better to live better. Okay, skip to the next slide. So brain control. Our breathing is, as you know, it's rhythmic, it's automatic. We often don't think about it. We're asleep a third of our lives and we're still breathing. But we know that if we stop breathing, we will die. So it is a very, very important behavior. It's actually not like the heart, because the heart also has its rhythmic pace control. But the breath relies on the brain. The brain sets the rhythm to how we breathe. And the brain is impacted by many different things. And so our breathing rate can change instantaneously with our emotional state or with what's going on in our lives or our environment. And it's very critical to understand just the impact of how so many things affect our breath, so that we can understand it and take control of our breaths, and maybe even have more control over our own bodies and minds. It's coordinated with so many different systems. So I mentioned, the brain and body, but it's coordinated with our heart. It's coordinated with our brainstem, with different parts of the brain. We can talk about like all the different parts of the brain that are involved. This is mechanics now. We're talking about how breathing works. And inspiration is a beautiful word because it means inhalation. In science, we often talk about inspiration, meaning the inhale of the breath. But also, if you think about it, it's inspirational. You're taking in things. And the beauty about breath, and hopefully I'll make this very clear by the end, is that the inhalation bit is very important. We've been focusing quite a bit, I think, on exhalation because we're living in a constant state of apnea, where we're just not breathing deeply, and we're always focusing on take a deep breath, but exhale it out, exhale it out. Well, I kind of want to flip back the focus on inhaling, because it's the inhalation and the inspiration part that's really interesting. When we talk about the mechanics, we're talking about how the breath actually forms and how it becomes this rhythm, this pacemaker in the brain telling our lungs and our muscles how to contract, because we can't breathe unless our diaphragm contracts to inspire, to inhale, and to exhale, it releases and relaxes. So that inspiration, you got to tell the muscles to relax, you got to tell the rib cage to expand, and these mechanics are critical to having a proper inspiration, a proper inhale breath. One interesting thing about these particular breaths, these inhaling breaths that we take, as you know, we take 20,000 breaths per minute, but we also sigh every few minutes. We might not be conscious that we're doing it, but we do sigh, and we're also not the only animals to do it. It's been found in other mammals especially. So everyone kind of just does that, that sigh. It doesn't have to be so dramatic, but a sigh is a little bit of a longer inhale and a little bit of a longer exhale. It's just a longer breath. And in our brain, it's marked, it is patterned. It basically is pre-programmed in our brain that we take a little bit of a longer breath every few minutes. Why do we do that? It's thought that we have in our lungs these little sacs that might not be fully popped open. So if you think of a latex glove, like in the lab or in a medical setting, and sometimes if you want to reposition the glove on your hand, you blow into it so that you blow out the fingers, and then you can fit the glove better. And so it's thought that this inspiration, this extra long sigh, is popping open the lung particles, the sacs and all of that, so that we can take better breaths in the next seconds and minutes. So there are different kinds of breaths, and there are different functions for all these little types of breaths. And so with the sigh, we're creating, a deeper inhale and a deeper exhale, but probably to just really pop open everything so that we can take better breaths and clearer breaths. And this is also shown in hospital settings when they have ventilators. When they program the ventilator to have a little bit of a longer breath every few minutes, the person does better. They get healthier. And also, that's natural breathing controls these oscillations. And so you don't always have to be focused on your breath, because that can be very time consuming. It's 20,000 breaths per minute. But if you just know that also the natural breathing, the oscillations, it also synchronizes different parts of our brain and body. It synchronizes parts of our brain called the hippocampus, which is very important for our memory, and it involves the amygdala, which is very important for our emotional processing. So you can see in this picture all of the different parts that are involved with just breathing, like even automatic subconscious kind of breathing. So it's affected here as an image of the brain, and you can see that big part of the brain in purple is our cognition, emotion. The amygdala and the hippocampus are deep structures within that, but most of this bit in the front is the cortex, which is our cognition, is how we think about things. And the vagus nerve is a very large nerve that connects to a lot of our organs. So it wraps around the organs, and it's very important for our parasympathetic system, but our overall health. Because it tells the brain what's going on internally. And a lot of that can happen even subconsciously. So, a stomach ache or butterflies in your stomach, or all of these could be signs of stress. And before you even know that you're stressed, your body definitely knows you're stressed. And there is it's here in red, it's called the specific area that was discovered to be the area of where this oscillation happens, where the rhythmic pattern happens for breathing. And it's actually synchronizing everything together for oxygen consumption and carbon dioxide release. So of course, if you're in a room with too much carbon dioxide and you might feel sleepy, it all is connected with mood, with memory. If you want to perform better, you can control the gases, but you can control temperature, and you can really find ways to perform better. And the pre-bot, see that little symbol. So that's the pre-Botzinger complex. That's the part of the brain that is the seat of breathing. And it's not named after somebody. I discovered this on an article I read, which was very interesting. Botzinger was the name of a wine that was being had by the neuroscientists at the time. So they weren't able to decide on the name of the new structure or complex, a system of neurons. And so they've named it after the wine they had. And so that's the Botzinger complex. And that's the area in the brainstem, which is the very ancient part of our brain that is controlling such automatic behaviors like breathing. That's where our breathing oscillators are located. And the interesting thing about this, like I mentioned, I want to put the focus back on inspiration and inhalation, is because through the nose is where a lot of the changes that we see in our behavior happen. And this is shown by scientific studies. So what a lot of studies are showing is that they'll ask participants to do a variety of different things. So for example, showing pictures of fearful faces, or faces that are angry, or some emotional state that might cause you fear. So you as a person will be able to better and more quickly tell whether this person is fearful to you in an inhalation and not the exhalation. It's that quick. So if you're going like this, and you see something fearful, you might be more fearful than if you were going on an exhale. Do what you will with that information, because that means that you can control how fearful you feel with which part of the breath you're on, which is super, to me, I found that super fascinating. Another thing, memory. People are better able to retain memory and recall memory, actually memory recall, when you're when you're in the inhalation part, the inspiration part. So if you want to remember something, and then you might be able to recall that better. If you want to think more clearly, the inhalation through the nose. What they did is they also asked participants to do it through the mouth, oral breathing. It didn't work. And so the new neuroscience is showing that breathing through the nose sends signals in a different way than through the mouth to the brain, telling the brain to be more alert, to be, faster, perform better. So we're actually able to perform better when we're able to inhale versus on the exhale. But the exhale obviously has a lot of function. It calms us. It's that parasympathetic. It calms everything down. So if you are too fearful, you might want to take a longer exhale. But if you want to remember things and you want to be quick, you want to inhale as you're thinking of these things. And I think we know that inherently. When somebody, if you think of a high diver and they're about to jump off, I'm pretty sure that they're going to take a deep breath in and then do that. Even though they might breathe through their dive, they still are going to take off on an inhale, because that's when their brain is going to perform the best. So through the nose and inhalation, really new, interesting, fascinating neuroscience around why it's very important. And speaking of, jumping off a high dive, which to me would be incredibly stressful. There's many different kinds of stresses. We have environmental stress, we have psychological stress, we've got internal, body stress. We are constantly being, attacked by different kinds of stress. It comes in many different colors. And the variety of stress affects us in a variety of ways. And so how stress works is there's two main mechanisms. When it comes from the outside, stress can, be environmental. So our skin might feel it first because it's either a change in temperature or UV or wind. And so our skin will send signals to our brain saying our environment is changing. Maybe there's danger involved. And so it changes our chemistry so that we're prepared for danger. Psychological stress is probably borrowed as a system of a network of behaviors or mechanisms, really, from the brain, from the body. So now, because we're humans and we've evolved to have problems with, relationships and money and also, and stresses of, not doing well on a test, whatever it is, those are very modern human issues. They're not the kinds of issues that ancient humans dealt with, which were more environmental stresses. You're going to get eaten by a lion, so you need to run away. Here it's more like, I forgot to do my taxes, and you get the same reaction in your body. The same reaction happens. You activate something called the hypothalamic pituitary axis, which is brain, body, and that tells the body to run away from danger. But obviously you're not actually running away on a savannah from a lion, and you're just sitting in traffic or you're having an argument. And so the same mechanisms happen. So over time, this wears down our body and our tissues and our organs, and it's called a load that we have on our organs. So it becomes overloaded, we have become stressed, and then we have many different ailments due to our own human psychological stress. Breathing, as we very well know, is affected by stress. If we're about to experience stress, even before it happens, usually a physical stress, like it's going to happen, your breathing rate changes. You start to breathe faster because you need more oxygen in your bloodstream to send that to the muscles so that they work better and faster. So we've known for a long time that stress affects our breathing rate. And what we have to keep in mind is that we can also reduce stress with our breath. We're able to control our heart rate with our breath. If you exhale, you will be able to reduce your rapid heart rate, and you can bring that down. We know the stress response. There is also something called the relaxation response. And I've talked about meditation for many years, and it's a great thing to do. But for people that don't have time to learn to meditate or just do it, the most basic thing to do is some breath work, is to know how to control your breath so that you can reduce all of these different kinds of stresses. And like I mentioned earlier, we spend about a third of our lives asleep. And there's many different things that connect how we sleep with how we breathe as well. One of the biggest problems around the world is different kinds of insomnia and sleep apnea, and just not being able to breathe properly during sleep. But it's a cycle, because if you're chronically stressed, your breath is shorter, more constricted, it's less you're holding it, you're in a state of apnea. And so that can affect the organs in a nighttime as we're trying to restore our bodies and our minds and our organs and our cells and our tissues. They might not be functioning as well. And so sleep is imperative as a restorative mechanism for our minds and our bodies. And there's so much more to sleep around everything from immunity to longevity. But just a quick little recap on sleep is it's a part of the time of the day that we need as humans. We need a good 7 hours as adults, and more as children. We need these 7 hours at night to produce the right kind of hormones so that we can function better. And melatonin production is even linked to breathing patterns. And so to sleep better, again, just like I mentioned with stress, sleeping better, whether it's insomnia or whether it's falling back asleep, it's another mechanism would be to control your breath and take those deeper breaths. And there's better research out there around the value of deeper breathing or diaphragmatic breathing to improve sleep and obviously reduce stress. So we know that there are many different things that we can do to affect our mind and body. So now you know how breathing affects our brain. It affects all the different areas of the brain. It kind of acts in concert with our mood, with our cognition, and thus with our behavior. And so breath could be work. Breath work is a whole, it's ancient, actually. We've known for many thousands of years that controlling the breath is going to be having an effect on our mind or body. But now we know a bit more in terms of the neuroscience. We know that it triggers the relaxation response. And we know a little bit more about the nuances of breath work, whether it's yogic breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, box breathing. Like, there's a lot of different kinds of breath out there and breath work out there. But each of them have their own, benefits and how they affect the brain and the mind and also the body. But what we do know is that putting the work in and doing some breath work on a regular basis is just going to help you be more mindful and conscious about your own body and your own body's reactions. Because as you become more in tune with your body, which is another, benefit, I guess, of all of this, called interoception, is how much you know your own body. You're able to gauge when it goes out of sync or when it goes out of balance. So when you become stressed, it's easier for you to become aware of how your breath has changed. And then that should trigger your mind to say, okay, my breath is more shallow, so I'll just take 1 or 2 or 3 deep breaths, and it rebalances everything. It rebalances the parasympathetic system, the hormonal changes that happen, the immune cells that are also activated because, you know, during a period of stress, you also have inflammation. So there's a lot, and this is in a matter of seconds. There's really interesting research. It's more on a very quick meditation, but the genes, the function of the genes can change within seconds. So you can turn on anti-inflammatory genes and you can turn off inflammatory gene function with something as simple as breath work. So just emphasizing what we already know, that breathing is crucial to our minds and bodies, and if we stop breathing, we die. But if we become conscious about it, and if we have conscious breath, then we have so much more room for benefit for our minds and bodies. And like I mentioned, if we were just conscious of a few or maybe even more of all those 20,000 breaths that we take per day, imagine what we can do with our minds and our bodies. I think we have reached an untapped potential there with just our breath. Just the fact that we know how important it is for our emotion, for our cognition, and how easy it can be because we know how to breathe inherently. So if we were just more conscious about it, if we were a little bit more conscious about our breath, then I think we could make a big difference in our minds and bodies and our collective consciousness. Thank you.
Brilliant. That was fascinating.
Oh, you know what? Sorry. I don't know if you can. I do have one. A couple more. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought that was. Yes. Okay.
Go for it.
Back to this. Okay, because I can go on and on and on about all of the things that we can do to breathe better. Nature. Breathing in nature is even better. So yes, we can be inside, you know, our homes and our offices, and ideally we have some greenery around us at all times because, as you know, we inhale oxygen and plants inhale carbon dioxide. We are inherently connected on this planet. They need us, well, they may not need us, but we need them to breathe. We need plants. And the oxygen that we breathe, a lot of it comes from the ocean life, ocean plants, but also from regular plants, on terrestrial plants. And so nature, in particular trees and plants that have a lot of oils in them, they release a lot of chemicals that we breathe in, whether we like it or not, but they reduce our stress levels as well. So there's these phytochemicals called phytoncides, and phytoncides are released by trees, and as we breathe them in, we can lower our stress levels, like cortisol in the blood goes down, and we can even help with our immunity. And there's something called forest bathing where you can really take all of this into effect. And so there's a lot to do with how we breathe, but also where we do it. And yeah, sorry, that was a little bit more. So yes, hopefully with all this information, we can get breathing in a more conscious way so that we can improve our minds and bodies. Thank you.
Fantastic. That was really fascinating, just seeing the connection between the brain and the breath, which we know is there, but between the brain and the body, there is so much connection involved, and we're going to be exploring more of these topics throughout the symposium. And we have Patrick McCohen, who is a breathwork specialist, so he will be picking up on what Claudia has talked there about the importance of the nose breathing and conscious breathing and some breathwork techniques. We also touch on meditation, and Claudia is also going to be talking to us about sleep in particular. And we also have information on inflammation. So all of these things, and what Claudia has done for us today, which I'm very grateful for, is bringing the connection all together for us. And through the use of halotherapy, which is why we are here today, halotherapy can help with all of these, with the breathing, with the sleep, with the meditation, relaxation, inflammation. So thank you again, Claudia, for opening our 2022 symposium.
Thanks, everyone.